How did you begin or come to begin working at Seneca Glass?
Well, Seneca Glass, I have a picture here. Seneca Glass started in 1891 and ended in 1983. And after working at Bailey Glass, I decided that I would try to get a job at Seneca. I don't recall having any family members at Seneca, but it was right next to Bailey, by the way, along the river on Beechurst Avenue. And it was before the railroad tracks there along the river. So I decided to walk in there and talk to someone about a job, and they directed me to the cutting department. And I was shortly hired there in 1980. So the first area was in the cutting department. There's actually four little areas that people do specific jobs. One was the washing and the drying and the selecting of the ware and the packing. And selecting, that means that you inspect it for firsts and seconds and so on. Along the wall in this big cutting department was a row of employees that cut stems. And I don't think there was more than half a dozen, as I recall. There weren't that many, but there was at least 5 or 6 of them. And in the middle part of the cutting department were the few people, maybe 4, 5 at the most, that cut the designs on the stemware and the junior jars and so on. So, and then the washing and drying section was mainly at the end. It took most of the part of the department. And then on the opposite wall of the room, there were 2 men, and they repaired the glassware and the stems. And so it has the 4 sections: the wash, the stem cutting, the design cutting, and the repairs.
What was your first job there, Becky?
My first job there was washing and drying, and now that I look back on it, it really was a good way to start a job when you start from the bottom up. They always say you get a real clear picture of the whole picture of what the company is all about. And I started washing and drying with this older lady, and keep in mind I was young, so maybe I'm older now than what she was, but at that time there was an older lady that worked washing ware, and also there was another one there too that did the packing. But we washed and dried ware, and there was this, we washed in this aluminum tub, or it was copper, and I recall it having cold water, but there was a pipe that ran into the tub to force steam out through the cold water, and that's what heated the water. So it made this bubbling noise the whole time you're using it, and it was kind of interesting to me how they heated that up. But the first thing they told me that you were not to wear any rings, because rings with the diamonds and so on do scratch glass. So that was one of the first things I learned about glass. And so they gave me an apron, and this apron, I'm amazed I still have it after 40 years, but I do. And it's kind of, precious to me now that I'm older, but they gave that to me to wash ware, and the pockets we would use to put our pencils and markers in when we selected and inspected the ware. So deep scratches, and when I say selected ware, I mean we washed them, then we had to dry the glass, stemware, and so on. And you inspected it. We used this, it's more like a pencil, a red marker. And you would, after it's dried, you would circle the deep scratches on it. Some of the ware had blisters. If they had too many blisters or too many sand particles, that would be seconds. So there were specific designs cut on the seconds. I can tell if I have a piece of Seneca ware, or if I see it somewhere, I know if it's a second or not because I know what simple designs that they cut on the seconds. So me and this other lady would select and circle these scratches. So the two gentlemen that worked in the repair section would repair these. And what they would do, once we had a big box, we have these big boxes with dividers, and once we got one done, these two men would come and they would get the ones that we marked for repairs. One guy, he used the mud-like substance to smooth out, or sand out, I would say, the scratches, and it made like a gray area on and it was just little tiny spots that he had to touch. I can't really explain to you how the men repaired the ware, because they had a wall between, just a little wall divider, and it may have been because of the dust and the mud and that kind of thing that they used. So, but anyway, they would take the box back and they would repair some of that wear. And after a while, of course, keep in mind I was young, so after a while, I had one guy calling me Hawkeye, and but I don't really think that was really a compliment. I think he was trying to tell me in a nice way to, I don't really need to mark that much, I just need to, it's a little bit too much, go overboard marking these imperfections that he has to repair. But then once we washed and dried it again, then the other gentleman would buff it out. And that means he used this light pink pumice powder substance that smoothed that gray area out. So that was pretty neat. I learned some other things in that department too. I learned to do the clappers of these bells. Now these bells, I recall Seneca only having these specific clappers. That's what these little things that make this noise, those are clappers, and they only use this specific kind that I'm aware of. And there's, as you can see, there's 3 different size bells, but there is another one that's smaller that they made during the holidays, and it doesn't have a handle on it. But anyway, these bells with these clappers, every one of them would have that, and as you can see, some of them have cuttings, some don't. But we did, I had to do a lot of the clappers in here. And I also did some of the wrapping. And there is a correct way to stack glassware and stems. And so I've learned a lot from just that one area. But in the later, I worked at Seneca the last few years before they closed. So they had purchased this sand grip machine that would sandblast Seneca stamp, and some of these have that stamp on it. This one does, and it is, I believe it's in the middle here. Not sure if you can zone in on that or not, but it is, as you can see, it's sandblasted, and this little machine had a rubber base to it, and you would press it on this, and Seneca was cut out of this rubber, and you had a foot pedal, and you pressed it down like this, and it would sandblast that Seneca logo. And so there's several pieces that I had to have that Seneca sand grip machine. But that was the later years that Seneca had that. It wasn't, I'm going to say maybe a year or so. It wasn't that long. I have some other pieces that have that sandblasted. And also the cool thing too about Seneca is they allowed the public to bring in stemware that was chipped, and they would repair them. And that is amazing because they only charged $1 a stem, and that, you had to wash it and you had to dry it. It had to be buffed out and sanded and washed and dried and packed, all for $1 a piece. So I thought that was really cool that if you had stem wear and it was next to nothing, be able to fix it like new, and it was really nice.
Was there room for advancement, and did you pursue it?
Yes, I was very lucky. I had worked in the washing in that department for a long time, and I enjoyed that. But the artistic person in me and creative, I get curious of what the others were doing, and I wanted to learn how to cut and cut the designs and the stems. And we had this supervisor, department supervisor. He would come down maybe once or twice a week or so, and maybe not on a daily basis, but on a regular basis, to see how things worked and if the grinders and machines were working. And so I got up enough courage to ask him one day when he came down if it would be okay sometime if they had I'd be interested in cutting, and if they had a position that I'd be interested in moving on and learning how to cut. So time went by, and he stopped by 2 or 3 times and never said anything. So I didn't know whether he really wasn't interested in me cutting, or maybe there wasn't a position open. But anyway, after a few weeks, he came down one day, and he came to me and he said, "Hey, if you're still interested in learning to cut, let's try out on cutting stems." So I was so excited, and I was a little scared, but I was excited at the same time. But I had mixed emotions. I had grown to become very close friends with this older lady, and I kind of felt bad, but at the same time, I knew it was meant to be for me to move on. So that's how I ended up in a different department.
What types of glass did you cut, and how was this done?
I started in the stems, cutting the stems, and it would be like this, for instance, and also the bells. The bells, like this one, has the cutting along here. And this stemware, as you can see, it's more of an average size, and then we have bigger ones too. And we have some, let's see, the smaller stem. This is an iced tea. And as you can see, there's all different sizes and thickness of these stems, and which makes a difference, because the thing about this is the stone wheels that we used were set up according to the size of these stems. So we also did decanters. And decanters are one of the hardest things there is to cut. There was an older lady that did the tumblers, and she did the decanters. And we were set up, we sat on these tall wooden benches, and it had this horizontal stone, big horizontal stone, that had running water constantly on it, and it spinned around. And so we set up high, and they changed out these stones according to the size of the goblet, and or the decanters. And so we had this foot pedal, and it would move this little wooden block as we pressed the foot pedal, this little wooden block against that big stone where the water's running and it's constantly moving. So what you would do is you would take your pieces, your stem, uncut stem, and you would set it between the stone and this wooden block. And once you used your foot pedal, it would press this against the stone, and you would have to look down in the goblet, and it would press this glass into that stone and make a gray area, which we call petals. And all of these have 6 petals. So some were small, some were big. Some goblets we did, they had the stems were so thin, a lot of them would just snap. I mean, it was unbelievable, some that they wanted to be cut. But that was, really the hardest thing was, like I said, was the decanter. But they were all different ones, and they went according to the size of the stem. And so you know how talented the men in the blowing room were, because there's no way we could have cut those stems as precisely as we did if they weren't good at their job. So that makes a big difference. And it was just according to the stones. So, but I do remember, again, we had our own boxes, and it had dividers into whatever stemware we were cutting. And I was told politely that I needed to slow down. And so, it is production, but I was young and I thought I was already going slow. But apparently I wasn't, not going slow enough. And so, which, I did not take that personally or anything, but they did tell me that. So I thought, okay, I'll slow down a little bit. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. And there, like I had mentioned before, the older lady that was there, she was getting ready to retire. So they had asked me, I don't recall if I had volunteered or they just asked me, I'm not sure, to start cutting the decanters and the tumblers. I don't have a tumbler with me. But compared to everything else to cut, the tumblers and the decanter was the hardest thing. It was a challenge. It really was. It took me twice as long to learn how to cut one of these. And it's because the flutes are wider and the stone is only so wide. So when you're cutting this and you have to move it, you're really cutting it twice. Where some of this little stuff, it cuts just like that in one little precise cut. Well, these are wider. So the wider they are, the harder they are, because you're making your own flute. Then you had to try to make them all the same size. So that was a challenge. But I did master that, and that was good. I was, happy with myself that I actually could do it. And so I was glad to be able to do that part.
And what were some of your fondest memories and not so fond memories while you were working there?
I became friends with one of the ladies there that cut stems too. Her husband worked in the blowing room. And so we became really good friends. But that's when I realized too, hey, I got a little bit of connections here. That when they were making special things, as they did in every factory during the breaks, during the lunchtime, they would make some special ware. And at lunchtime in the blowing room, for instance, let me get this out here. This ginger jar was one I recall getting at lunchtime. I never had a lot of money back then, and I was young, and like I said, so money was tight. But sometimes I couldn't resist. And I remember buying this for $20. And so some things I just couldn't. I do remember getting, there's these swans too. That was a special thing. And I do believe they do sell those in, they did sell those in the showroom. But I know these, the ones I got were the times when they had just started making them. And so that was special to me. And I don't know how many they've made or different colors or anything like that, but I just know these in particular are ones that I got when they were doing special stuff in the blowing room. And like I said before, I don't have a whole lot of stuff like that because money was tight and I couldn't do that. But there was a few times for family members and for holidays that I did go up to the showroom. And so it's amazing the few years I worked there, I had only gone up to that room probably twice. Because workers, they came and done their job and they went home. We had a time card, so we punched in, punched out, and that's what we did. So one of my favorite pieces is this piece right here. And this is the large ginger jar that they did. As you can see, it has beautiful cutting. And some of the cutting, it's clear, and some has that gray area. So that means it has been cut, washed, dried, and cut again, because it would have to be this clear dipped to make it clear, and then they cut it again and not dipped it to make it clear, so it has both. But it's just beautiful. And so there was a few things I had bought in the showing room, and I recall paying payments for this, and it was a lot of money to me anyway, but it was special, and I bought it for my in-laws, so I'm sure that made quite an impression. So that was their gift, and I just thought it was one of the prettiest things Seneca ever made. And so in time, I got to just buy a few of these and to cut some on them. So the thing about Seneca too I really enjoyed was when you learned how to cut, they gave that piece to you. And that's how I ended up with some of these pieces. It's not because I had the money to buy them. And so some of these were, or most of them were, because I had done some cutting on them. And so, for instance, this one here, this is a simple cut. And as you can see, it's got mostly just little leaves and some little flower petals and some little nodges here. And so I was, able to do a few of those pieces. But most of these were because I had cut something on them and I was able to keep them. And I thought that was, really nice of them to be able to do that. Later on in the last months, I'm going to say maybe the last 6 months or so, I was able to advance into cutting some of the leaves and just a little bit of, because you have to understand when you do cutting and patterns, everything on here has a different wheel. So one person might do the leaves, another person might do the flowers, because or you have to change into a different wheel, cutting wheel, to do that. Because each wheel has it affects different cuttings on what you're doing. So a lot of times it could go on to 3 or 4 hands before it was finished, the pattern. So it made a big difference. But unfortunately, I did not, before they shut down, I've got to do a few very simple things, and you have to progress slowly, learning one little cut at a time to learn how to do a full design. So unfortunately, I did not get to learn everything I wanted to learn in that area, but I did get to do a little bit of that. In 1983, my worst memory, and it's the only worst memory I ever had working at Seneca, was in 1983. They shut down. We were told they were shutting down. And also, this was my second experience of a factory shutting down. They don't give much notice in factories, and it could be for different reasons. One could be because, maybe people would quit and leave, and then their orders would not be completed and shipped out. Maybe they wouldn't be able to finish their orders before they shut down, or maybe it's because people would cart the merchandise off. I'm not sure. But in my experience, both of them shut down very quickly, within a week or so. You did not get much notice before they did that. And, again, I just remember all too well, just walking out Seneca and, those double doors where we walked in and out every day, and up the ramp, and I knew that would be the last time, and I was very upset, and I was even a little bit mad because, I wasn't ready. I hadn't finished what I set out to do. I wanted to learn more. I was anxious to do it, and I was young, and I loved my job. I loved working at Seneca, and I wanted to learn everything I could in the cutting department. And that, I didn't get to do that. But on a final note, I just want to say that I am so privileged to work in factories. I can, I moved on, but I recall after Seneca, by the way, I recall I was thinking about, do I really want to pursue working in a factory after 2 factories? So, I had decided to stop by another local factory in town, and I talked to the owner there, and I explained to him my experience working at Seneca and my experience working at Bailey and what I did. And he looked at me and he asked me, was I right-handed or left-handed? And yes, back then, I guess they could do that because he did. He asked me. And I said I was left-handed, and again, I, explained to him my experience working with Bailey and Seneca. But he just looked at me straight in the eye and said, "We do not hire left-handers." And that was really a hit below the belt, really. I was just taken back. I was really surprised and shocked, and I was young, so nowadays, if I had that happen to me, I would have a few things to say. But at that point, I didn't know. I was young and I didn't know what to do, and I decided, well, maybe I need to move on and with my life and not work, in a factory. So I decided not to do that. But I am very thankful. I've learned so much about glass and 2 totally different types of glass. And I use that today, my knowledge today, and I still love glass. And I have, I just have a lot of respect for all the workers and the talent that they have and the beautiful work that they put out. But I am very privileged to be able to work in glass factories, and I can honestly say I loved my job, because both those jobs I loved my job. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky, for sharing your fascinating story with us. It will become a part of the Oral History Archives at the museum in Weston, West Virginia.